They called him a threat, a puppet, a rebel. But what if he is none of those things and instead the mirror they fear? In a world where microphones are muted and cameras cut away, a voice has risen unfiltered, unedited, and unbought. Ibrahim Traore, a 34-year-old military officer from a country they thought they could ignore, is no longer speaking in whispers. He is roaring. This is not just a man. This is a message, a reckoning. For decades, the story of Africa was written with foreign ink, blood, poverty, corruption, and chaos. But what if that story was never ours? What if it was always theirs? And now, from the heart of Burkina Faso comes a voice breaking through the noise, a challenge to every newsroom, every embassy, every corporation that built its empire on the silence of the continent. Stay with us, not just to hear a speech, but to witness the unmasking of a century-old deception. Subscribe and lend your voice to Africa Rising, for we are no longer whispering. We are roaring. For years, we have been told a single story. It aired at 6 o'clock. It was printed on the front page. It echoed in classrooms and boardrooms. Africa, where flies swarm, guns blaze, and famine reigns. They called it journalism. We called it shame. You see, they showed the world Africa in fragments. Dusty children with swollen bellies, villages consumed by war, headlines painted in blood. They never showed us laughing, never showed us thriving. They never showed us building, creating, or resisting, because to do so would mean rewriting the script. And the script was profitable. Let us speak plainly. Africa holds 70% of the world's cobalt. Your mobile phone, your electric car, your laptop, they do not function without it. That cobalt flows from Congo, yet the very hands that mine it cannot afford the phones they build for you. 90% of platinum reserves lie beneath African soil, mostly in South Africa. Platinum powers your medical devices, your catalytic converters, your luxury watches. But what powers South Africa? Millions crushed beneath unemployment and inequality. 30% of the world's gold flows from Mali, Burkina Faso, Ghana, and Tanzania. Gold rivers beneath our feet. And yet, we swim in poverty. 65% of global diamond production is African. Botswana, Angola, Sierra Leone, Congo. Billions in diamonds sparkle on foreign necks and wrists. But in the mines, African men dig for $1 a day. 35% of uranium reserves, used to light cities like Paris, come from Niger, Namibia, and South Africa. But in those same places, blackouts darken homes and clinics. So ask yourself this: how can a land so rich be so poor? The answer? Because poverty in Africa is not an accident, it is engineered. Colonialism never left. It just changed its mask. Once they came with flags and muskets, now they come with logos and contracts. Once they ruled with chains, now they rule with credit. Take this example. In 2022, multinational mining companies earned $256 billion extracting cobalt from Congo. How much tax did Congo receive? $500 million. That is 0.2%. A joke told in boardrooms while mothers in Kinshasa boil leaves to feed their children. In Guinea, 20 million tons of bauxite are extracted each year. What's left behind? Toxic water, poisoned air, and cancer-ridden communities. In Angola, Nigeria, and Congo, oil companies pumped out $36 billion in 2022. What did they invest back? Oil-stained pipelines, leaky contracts, and debt. They build infrastructure, yes, but only from mine to port. They lay rails, but not to schools. They build pipelines, but not for clean water. Their maps end at the export terminal. Security? They provide it too, by arming private militias and declaring protests illegal, by hiring firms that answer not to law, but to shareholders. And when the people rise up, the media silences them. Local journalists are bought, foreign reporters are flown in, briefed and blinded. It is a perfect system, one that has operated for 100 years, and they do not see it, not because it is invisible, but because they are part of it. Take the colonial monetary system. 14 African countries still use a currency tied to a European treasury. Half of their reserves sit in foreign vaults, subject to negative interest rates. Imagine paying someone to hold your money. your own money. No one reports this. But when that same power grants $10 billion in aid, it makes headlines. Then there are the global financial centers, the beating heart of money laundering, offshore accounts, and illicit transfers. Every year, $88 billion leaves Africa through these hidden channels. And yet, every year, they write glowing reports about the $45 billion in aid coming in. They never write about the $192 billion going out. This is the trick. This is the scam. Africa is not poor. Africa is being bled dry. And in this bleeding lies the real story, a story they won't print. Because if the world knew, it would ask, who profits? Who owns the mines? Who signs the contracts? Who trains the soldiers guarding the gates? This is not just corruption, it is systematic extraction, a pipeline from African soil to foreign banks. Africa gives, the world takes. So the next time you see a headline about Africa needing help, remember, we are not the continent of aid. We are the continent that funds your lifestyle. We mine your cobalt. We power your cities. We sweeten your chocolate. We flavor your coffee. We energize your cars. And in return, we are buried in debt. But what happens when Africa stops playing by your script? When we write our own story and the world finally listens? History is not always written by the victors. Sometimes it is written by the editors. They told you Patrice Lumumba was a rebel. They forgot to mention he was elected. They said Thomas Sankara was radical. They forgot to mention he was visionary. They declared Muammar Gaddafi a tyrant. But they never told you why he had to die. Let us remember the names. Let us remember the truth. January 17, 1961, Patrice Lumumba, the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, was captured and executed by foreign-backed forces. His crime? Daring to say that Congo's resources should serve the Congolese people, not Belgian companies, not American firms, not the colonial elite. For 61 years, they denied involvement. And in 2022, they returned a single tooth to his family. Not justice, not truth, a tooth. And when that happened, what did the international media say? Chaos in Congo. They did not ask, who ordered his death? They did not investigate the documents. They did not name the foreign agents, because telling the truth would reveal the system. October 15, 1987, Thomas Sankara, president of Burkina Faso, was murdered in cold blood. They say it was a coup, but the bullet came from the same hand that feared his ideas. Sankara was not just a soldier, he was a gardener of the future. He vaccinated 2.5 million children against measles and meningitis. He planted 10 million trees to fight desertification. He raised literacy from 13% to 73%. He granted women full rights, banned female genital mutilation, outlawed forced marriages. He sold luxury cars of ministers and drove a modest Renault 5. He refused foreign debt, saying, "We cannot pay a debt we did not create." For these sins, he was eliminated. And who pulled the strings? A close ally supported by a European power? Do you want proof? Check the declassified archives. The evidence is public, but no one prints it on page 1. Instead, the headlines read, "Another dictator dead in Burkina Faso." October 20th, 2011, Muammar Gaddafi, leader of Libya, was lynched in the streets. They said he was mad. They said he was ruthless. But listen to the numbers. Per capita income, over $12,000, the highest in Africa. Literacy rate, from 25% to 74% in 2 generations. Free healthcare and education for all citizens. $50,000 marriage grant for young couples. 0 interest home loans. $5,000 childbirth allowance. Gasoline at 0.14 per liter. A massive irrigation project to green the desert. The Great Man-Made River. Plans to launch an African gold-backed currency. A proposal to sell oil and currencies other than the dollar. A vision for a United States of Africa. That was the real crime. Not the repression, not the paranoia, but the audacity to build an Africa that didn't kneel. And what came next? 3 governments, a never-ending civil war, slave markets, stolen oil, smuggled weapons, a failed state. They called it liberation. They called it democracy. But what kind of democracy ends with open-air slave auctions? Let us be clear. This is not about defending tyranny. It is about naming hypocrisy. Lumumba wanted sovereignty. They killed him. Sankara wanted dignity. They killed him. Gaddafi wanted unity. They killed him. And every time the Western media covered their deaths with a single phrase, instability in Africa. Not a word about the foreign hands, not a word about the stolen dreams. Because to tell the truth would mean admitting the West does not fear warlords. It fears leaders who awaken their people. Why else did they never mention that Sankara banned IMF loans, or that Gaddafi wanted an African central bank? Why else did they erase the part where Gaddafi housed thousands of African migrants, gave jobs, shelter, hope? Why did they never show Lumumba's last letter, written in blood, naming those who betrayed him? Because truth exposes the machine, and the machine cannot function under light. So ask yourself, who decides which African leader is called a dictator? And who decides who deserves a Nobel Peace Prize? When leaders serve the West, they are called reformers. When they serve their people, they are labeled tyrants. This is not coincidence. This is policy. And now, as new leaders rise in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, we hear the same old tune, democracy in decline. But what kind of democracy bombs hospitals? What kind of democracy supports coups if they serve foreign interests? What kind of freedom lets corporations extract billions while our children starve? If this is the price of their democracy, can Africa afford any more of their peace? They said they came to save us. They said they came to fight terror. But after nearly a decade of foreign boots on Sahelian soil, the only thing that grew faster than the dust was the death toll. Let us look at the numbers. 2013. Foreign soldiers arrived in Mali, part of a grand operation launched by a powerful European state. The mission? Defeat terrorism. 500 troops, $1 billion per year, state-of-the-art drones, armored vehicles, satellite intelligence. And yet in 2013, the region had 500 reported terrorists. By 2022, there were more than 5,000, a tenfold increase. So what happened? They had the technology, they had the money, they had the manpower. What they didn't have was the will to protect the people. They guarded uranium mines in Niger. They secured oil fields in Mali. They monitored railways in Burkina Faso. But they let villages burn. Terrorists were never within 50 kilometers of their camps. But civilians? Shot, kidnapped, displaced. And in the middle of this theater of peace came a grand performance. MINUSMA, the United Nations peacekeeping mission in Mali. 15,000 soldiers, $1.2 billion annually. 10 years, the result. Over 300 peacekeepers killed, thousands of civilians slaughtered, entire regions lost to militant control. And still, they asked for more troops, more money, more time. But we had seen enough, because peace is not a theater, and foreign soldiers are not saviors. Then came a shift, a new force not imposed, but invited, an ally, not a master. And within 6 months, everything changed. Terrorists fled from towns they had controlled for years. Markets reopened. Women walked without fear. Schools resumed. What was the difference? This ally did not speak of democracy. He did not preach rights from a podium. He walked with the people, ate with the soldiers, slept in the dust. He followed our rules. He honored our dead. He didn't arm ethnic militias to divide us. He didn't bomb weddings and call it collateral. He didn't declare peaceful assemblies illegal. And that's when the international media lost their minds. Authoritarianism rising. Democracy in retreat. They forgot to ask, whose democracy? The democracy where drone strikes kill villagers from 10,000 kilometers away? The democracy where private security companies guard oil rigs, not schools? The democracy where protesters are tear-gassed, shot, and disappeared? Let us speak truth. We were never fighting for their democracy. We are fighting for dignity, for security, for Africa's right to choose her own allies. And yes, we chose a new ally, not because we were brainwashed, not because we were desperate, but because we had run out of patience. And for the first time, we see results. In Burkina Faso, terrorist cells that once terrorized entire provinces are now on the run. In Mali, villagers testify that markets are open for the first time in years. In Niger, Borders once porous are now guarded by those who know the land, not foreigners who read from maps. This is not propaganda. This is not wishful thinking. This is what happens when soldiers fight for the people, not for pipelines. But of course, the world cannot accept it. Because if Africans start choosing their allies, what happens to the old masters? They call it Russian interference. They call them mercenaries. But when Western security firms operated in Africa for decades, were they not mercenaries too? No. They were called consultants. They were called stabilization teams. They were called partners. The truth is simple. They are not afraid of foreign soldiers. They are afraid of foreign soldiers they do not control. They fear a chasm in their monopoly. And so, they launch campaigns, reports, warnings. They cite human rights abuses, but never mention the wedding parties bombed by their own drones. They cite press freedom, but never mention how they fund entire media ecosystems to control the narrative. And through it all, they whisper, "This isn't progress, this is regression." But let us ask you, was it regression when our children could walk to school without fear? Was it regression when our markets buzzed again? Was it regression when our women danced at weddings no longer stalked by death? This is not regression. This is resurrection. If you believe this is not a regression, but a resurrection, say Africa Rising in the comments. But even as we reclaim our land and rebuild our homes, can we ever reclaim the story they stole from us? What happens when a continent loses control, not just of its gold, oil, and land, but of its own story? They call it journalism, but it is a script. And they've been rehearsing it for decades. In global newsrooms, the same voices echo. Reporters trained in elite schools, anchors who've never lived in Africa, correspondents who speak only French or English, but not Swahili, Hausa, Yoruba, or Amharic. They don't speak to the people. They speak about the people. And their sources? Always the same. Western diplomats, foreign NGOs, think tank experts, all funded by the same hands, all trained in the same worldview. They don't report. They translate propaganda into headlines. And what do they tell the world? That Africa is broken. That foreign aid is hope. That Western intervention is necessary. They never say that Africa loses $102 billion every year in illicit financial flows, tax evasion, interest payments, brain drain, and theft of natural resources. They only say that $134 billion in aid arrives. They never mention that Africa funds the West. They only say that the West is generous. And when challenged, they panic. Suddenly, African voices on TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter are labeled disinformation. Posts are censored. Videos are shadow banned. Fact-checkers, funded by the same corporations exploiting Africa, declare the truth misleading. But the people are no longer asleep. Online, millions of Africans are unearthing documents, tracing money, exposing hypocrisy. They ask, why do democracy-promoting foundations fund opposition movements? Why do NGOs own media houses? Why do foreign embassies sponsor civil society? And they tell the stories the news won't. They expose how celebrity activists adopt African children for headlines. How fundraising concerts raise millions, but the villages remain thirsty. How viral campaigns for war-torn regions bring foreign troops. Not peace. Remember the celebrity who adopted Malawi? They filled magazines. But 100 children die from malaria in Malawi every single day. They didn't write that because it doesn't sell. They call it the white savior complex. We call it PR imperialism. Even African media is not immune. Local newspapers are funded by foreign grants, journalists trained abroad, editors with ties to foreign embassies. So when we speak the truth, they call us radical. When we question power, they call us extremist. But here's the truth. We are not angry. We are awake. We are telling our story with our cameras, in our languages, on our terms. And if they block one account, 10 more rise. If they silence one voice, 1,000 more will speak. So what happens when Africa breaks free, not just economically, but narratively? What happens when the world hears our voice, uncensored? They tried to bury the truth, but they forgot. It was a seed. Today, a new generation is rising, not with guns, not with rage, but with Wi-Fi, history books, and courage. 600 million Africans under the age of 25, the youngest continent on Earth, and they are not silent. They are on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. They are creating, sharing, questioning. They are tearing down colonial myths, one hashtag at a time. Reject foreign intervention, 100 million mentions. US Africa is woke. 50 million. Shock, stop exploiting Africa, 75 million. This is not a trend. This is a revolution of consciousness. They said Africans were uneducated, but now we're reading treaties, analyzing contracts, challenging policies. They said Africans were passive, but now we're organizing, exposing, resisting. They said Africans were divided, but now across borders, tribes, and languages, we are united in truth. And at the heart of this storm stands a voice, calm, unshaken, unbought. Ibrahim Traore is not just a soldier. He is a reflection. He is what happens when the son of Africa refuses to be silent. He says, "We will fight for our land, not with drones, not from behind screens, but face to face, heart to heart, because we know the soil, we know our people, and we will win." He does not ask to be called president. He calls himself a servant. He does not stand above the people. He stands within them, and his weapon is not just a gun. It is truth. In Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, soldiers are now fighting not for foreign flags, but for their mothers, their markets, their mosques. And the youth? They are not waiting for Western approval. They are building a future rooted in pride, in history, in justice. This is not the return of the past. This is the arrival of something never seen before, an Africa that tells its story, chooses its allies, protects its children, and owns its future. They call it dangerous. We call it dignity. They call it regression. We call it Africa rising. And if they still don't understand, let them watch. Let them watch as Africa rises. Not with apologies, not with begging bowls, but with back straight, eyes forward, voice loud. Because we are not waiting for validation. We are walking forward with or without them. And when a continent rises with its youngest in the lead, what chapter of history will the world write next? For over 5 centuries, they told us who we were. They named our kings savages, our revolutions chaos, our wisdom superstition. They drew our borders. They stole our gods. They rewrote our stories. But now, we are writing our own ending. This is not just a moment. This is a reckoning, a turning of the tide. Ibrahim Traore did not come to beg. He came to confront. Not to divide, but to declare, we are no longer the shadows in someone else's spotlight. We are the fire. He is not the dictator they fear. He is the mirror they cannot face, and behind him stands a continent no longer silent. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, voices are rising, not just in anger, but in vision, in purpose, in truth. This is the heartbeat of a new era. This is what Africa rising truly means. It is not about slogans. It is about sovereignty. It is not about pity. It is about power. It is not about aid. It is about authorship. The world must choose to continue in denial or to walk beside a continent that remembers everything but forgives nothing. Because Africa forgets no friend, and Africa outlasts every foe. This time, we are not asking for a seat at their table. We are building our own, and we are not alone. We are millions strong. We are truth on fire. We are unstoppable. If this truth stirred your soul, don't just scroll, like, share, and speak truth aloud. Subscribe, because this time Ibrahim Traore is not speaking alone. This time, Africa Rising speaks with one voice. Goi Ibn Luan. Africa Rise. Ibrahim is right. New Africa now. Truth cannot be silenced.